Entering the Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, the final DraftKings Millionaire Maker for PGA of the season. And we're going to try to go about this a little bit differently because I've had very little success at the majors so far this season as it pertains to DraftKings. And maybe it's the people I'm talking to, like Ben Rasa and Mike Leone, who are joining me to break down our early look on the field. We're doing this. The pricing has just come out. So the way this week is going to work is going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to do an initial DraftKings thoughts, and then we're going to do an initial betting thoughts with the GUP and NYC punter. And then as the week of, on Monday, Jeff Feinberg will join me in studio to give our bets. And then Tuesday, two surprise DraftKings guests to reevaluate the field following the WGC Bridgestone and get our finalized DraftKings picks in. And hopefully it leads to a little bit more success. Live chat next Wednesday with Reed Fowler as well, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on the DraftKings YouTube channel. I'll be taking all your questions. Few things to do right off the hop. One, become a member of Fantasy National. The Fantasy National Golf Club offers all the tools you'll need to compete. Betting market, DraftKings market, all DFS markets, the most customizable stat engine there is, event simulator, lineup generator, ownership projections, course breakdown. What more could you need? It's $8 for a week, and if you get in before the WGC Bridgestone, you get the 2-for-1, but the monthly package is only $25 as well. If you're playing in the Millionaire Maker, now that's $20. This seems like something you want to become a member of to get the most bang for that $20. Or you could potentially get some free bucks into the Million Maker, because if you give the episode a like, go down to the comment section and tell me your single favorite value play on the board along with your DraftKings handle, you will be entered into a draw to receive some free DK bucks before the start of the PGA Championship. Also on Twitter, if you see anything PGA Championship related come out, give it a retweet, not a quote tweet, that will disqualify you. Give it a retweet and then reply to me with your DraftKings handle and the hashtag DKPGAChamp. Champ in all caps. Not necessary, but it might have a little bit of an influence on everything. But guys, Ben Rasa, fanvice.com. You just saw the pricing. First thought, initially, right off the hop.
Honestly, it looked pretty standard. Nothing jumped out. There's a lot of people at the bottom who I've never heard of, and that's expected in the PGA Championship. But yeah, I think it's kind of what I expect. It doesn't look overly soft, which I'm happy about. Majors are always kind of a different animal to tackle, but I liked it at first glance.
All right, Mike Leone, dailyroto.com. Do you have a take that is a bit hotter than Ben's?
First thing I noticed, I was really happy that Tony Finau finally got priced in the 8,000s. I'm hoping that keeps the ownership somewhat deflated because, he was ridiculously cheap last time out at 7,200. The Open Championship, even the U.S. Open, I think he was 7,600. So I was happy about that. Second take, not so hot, but it did seem like for the Open Championship, we saw a really kind of clear way to build some studs and duds rosters. I didn't see that in the initial pricing for the PGA Championship. I think we're back to that balanced build that you often get with the majors pricing.
All right, so this is almost us talking through our thought process on the week. So we're not going to make any conclusive picks because that would be crazy. A week out from the event, we need to see the conclusion of the WGC Bridgestone and maybe the Barracudas in case someone pops up through there, gets himself into the field or just is in the field and just plays a whole lot better, like my main man JJ Spawn. If he can go out and win, he'll end up becoming chalk for the PGA Championship because he's so lowly priced down here. He's hard to find. He's so lowly priced, but just initial thoughts on the course and the types of players that you're going for. I made an initial model on fantasynational.com with what I think it's going to project out to be. I'll have my column up over the weekend that will dig a little bit deeper into this, but for me, it looks like off the tee with a lean towards accuracy. But this is a par 70 that's over 7,400 yards. This is a really, really, really long course. So, Mike, at first glance, what types of players do you think you'll be targeting?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Stroke gain off the tee is going to be big. I might lean a little bit towards distance over accuracy just because the length that you mentioned when you're talking 7,400, I think it's over 7,500 yards actually. And I think there's 3 par 5s, but they might have actually converted one of the par 5s to a par 4 for the PGA Championship. But there's going to be a lot of trouble off the tee in terms of bunkers. It sounds like the bunkers here are really big, both in terms of depth and the length of them. So it's going to be a challenging course, I think. But I'm leaning towards strokes gained off the tee, which it feels silly to say because we're always looking at that. It's always such a crucial part of the game. But I think in these majors, we've really seen guys that are getting on the fairway, getting distance gains off the tee, having even more of an advantage than usual.
So what I did when I tried to comprise all the stats together, I still use strokes gained ball striking, which is the summation of strokes gained off the tee and strokes gained approach. But I added back in off the tee and approach and weighted off the tee slightly more because, I mean, these are the things that I really want to hit on. These are the types of players that I want to target. So I did throw that in, and I put in fairways gained at a very minimal portion. It didn't include driving distance, just to see who would mesh well and come out and compute near the top. So if you're wondering, over the past 36 rounds, the leaders in this field in strokes gained off the tee: Dustin, Bubba, Rahm, List, Woodland, Molinari, Neiman, Brennan Steele, JB Holmes, Tommy Fleetwood, Billy Horschel, Ryan Moore, Bo Hostler, and Byung-Hun An are the guys that lead that, at least in the shorter term of the past 36 rounds. You can adjust by any sort of date range that you'd like on Fantasy National. That's the one that I'm just currently looking at right now. Ben, what stats do you think are popping off to you, and how do you think this course is going to play?
Yeah, it's an interesting course. Obviously, I wasn't too familiar with it. Off the tee is going to be important. I'm kind of splitting hairs. Total driving, something I'll look at. I lean a little accuracy over distance if I had to choose. I think keeping it in the fairway is going to be important. I've seen it's tree lined, but around the green, I think it's going to be important. Ton of bunkers, and these greens are big from what I've read. So you're going to see guys have to focus on lag putting. They're going to have pars in that 5 to 10 foot range. They're going to have to convert. So guys that can kind of be crafty around the greens, hold it together. I think no matter how good you're striking it, you're going to be forced to scramble at a place like this. So, I lean to those type of guys. Power always helps, of course, but I don't think it's, a prerequisite for a course like this.
So looking back at previous tournaments held at Belle Reve in St. Louis, we have the 1992 PGA Championship. It played as a par 71 that year at 7,150 yards. The 1965 U.S. Open, so we can glean a lot from that. That was a par 70, just a shade under 7,200 yards. The last real notable event was what is now called the Northern Trust, or it might be called the Dell Technologies, whatever it was. It was called the Barclays at the time. The first leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs. The 2008 BMW Championship was the last time a competitive tournament was held here. It was a par 70 that year, 7,324 yards. Only 7 eagles on the course. Now, only 2 par 5s, but the scoring average played slightly below par, 69.38, 35 of 54 in terms of difficulty this year. I've already seen the rough. It looks penal if you end up going into it. Like you mentioned, all the bunkers that are around. It doesn't seem like the water is going to come as much into play. Technically, it's on 11 of the holes, but it's harder to find than normal. So that's just something to look at when we go through all of this. Remember when we did the Byron Nelson breakdown and they had like Zoyzea fairways? Well, that's here too, but it is bent grass greens if we're looking for it. So these are just sort of the things that we can kind of go back on. But the big thing to me, I think, is this is a Reese Jones redesign. So other courses that he's either designed or redesigned in the past that have held big scale tournaments, consistent tournaments, or majors. Eastlake, Baltusrol, where the PGA Championship was 2 years ago. Bethpage Black, Atlanta Athletic Club, where Keegan beat Duffner in that playoff of the PGA Championship in 2011. Congressional, where Rory won. Medina, where Tiger beat Sergio and he beat Sean McKeel. Those were both PGA Championships. Oakland Hills, Torrey Pines, Hazeltine, and Cog Hill would be the ones that you're looking for this. Did you put any thought, Ben, into how previous PGA Championships have played out, potential course corollaries? Because I do think that Bridgestone might actually line up pretty well with this.
I was about to say Bridgestone. This is an event this week that I'm actually paying close attention to in terms of correlation. It's another long track. Par 5s are massive there. We have all the same guys. It's a super field because it's WGC. I think that's a pretty good comparison. You can look at past PGAs. I think that's helpful. You get a feel for what kind of guys kind of can attack them. But similar to the U.S. Opens, it's a rotational. Obviously, it's tough to really peg someone. It's not like Augusta where guys can get acclimated. I'm sure a lot of these guys have never played this course.
Well, the big thing, I mentioned that 2008 BMW Championship. Here was the leaderboard from that year. And obviously it's going to play a little bit differently, but it did seem to lean the more accurate type of players. Camilo Villegas actually won, followed by Dudley Hart, Jim Furyk, Anthony Kim. There's a throwback. I wish Anthony Kim would come back. Stephen Ames, KJ Choi, DJ Trahan, Tim Clark, Hunter Mahan, Freddie Jacobson, Steve Stricker, Brian Gay. Leone, this is like your ideal leaderboard.
Yeah, I know like half the guys on that leaderboard.
Hey, Steve Stricker was in there.
Well, yeah, Stricker's our boy, of course. But I think as been noted, like obviously you want to be accurate off the tee, but you noted, it's penalized in the rough off the tee. Ben noted that even when you get close to around the green, you're going to need to scramble a bit. It's big greens. And, generally course fit is something that with the data golf projections at Daily Roto, we factor in a little bit less than I think some other sites. And you start to see it again at a course that we're not overly familiar with, where I'm not going to go overboard trying to force in a course fit that I'm not entirely sure. Again, I do like strokes gained off the tee as a metric that, maybe I'll use to eliminate some guys, but by and large, I'm just trying to get the most talent in at the best price tag. I know it sounds boring, but I'm not going overboard with the course fit for a few reasons.
Well, I mean, that's how a lot of people have been winning these millionaire makers, just taking the value, let it ride, and all of a sudden you're splitting millionaire makers because it's chalky, but it is a very effective method. Ben, do you think that all the chalk hitting at the past two majors is going to affect how people make their picks this week?
Yeah, to an extent. I think we've seen that even in non-majors. I know last week I thought that there was a lot of not bad chalk by any stretch, just chalk and concentrated ownership, and those guys played really well. I'll probably continue to get burned by that, especially in a top-heavy tournament like the Millie. It doesn't mean you can't win. We've seen it. People are splitting Millies, but long-term, I think you still kind of want to go against the grain in certain spots. You don't want 6 guys that are all 1% owned, obviously. But just, if you have concentrated ownership, the fields are so talented in majors. There's plenty of pivots in different ways to kind of make some leverage.
What do you think, Mike? Do you think it will have an effect on how people select their teams?
I think it might a little bit, because I think sometimes when you get burned by chalk a few weeks in a row, you start thinking to yourself, these game theory players, they don't know what they're talking about. You just got to take the best play. That's the way to play it. I do start to think that when it happens a few times in a row, that mentality does affect people when you're making your rosters. And I'm with Ben. You don't want to be making chalky rosters, even if it's good chalk. You don't want duplicated lineups. I think for the Open Championship, I had 100 lineups in, and I had maybe 10 that were due, probably less. I was pretty happy with that. And I'll try and do the same thing this week. And just by consistently being overweight the guys that are too low owned, that might be like the 3rd, 4th best plays in the tier, and then being underweight the guys that are, really chalky, especially when you leverage that against, like, we have finish probabilities done by Data Golf. When you look at the top 20 odds, I like to compare that to the ownership projections and try and mess around sometimes with some like arbitrary math, but just like comparing them, looking at the price tag and trying to figure out, okay, based on their finish probabilities, maybe I'll factor in some of the market odds in case we're off a little bit, but is this player going to be over or under owned? And that's really where I'm starting my research when I'm like really getting down to building my final rosters.
All right, let's get into the pricing. Dustin Johnson comes in as the most expensive player. Obviously, after I picked him to win the British Open, he did not. And then I did not pick him to win the Canadian Open, which he did. So that's always fun. He's 11-4. Rory is 11 on the dot. Spieth is 10-7. Ricky Fowler is 10-2. Although the pricing isn't super soft, it's concentrated in that $9,000 and $8,000 and upper $7,000 level. We only have 4 players that are above $10,000, which, I mean, is sort of the trend for these millionaire makers, but it seems atypical that you only have 1 player or 2 players that are above 11,000, then 2 players in the 10s. Ben, do you have a preference of any of these guys right off the hop? Because it seems like everyone's going to ride or die potentially with Dustin Johnson once again, but based on everything I've ran so far, I kind of like Rory.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I like Rory. It's, you mentioned Congressional. I expect him to play well at Bridgestone, which is a course that I am weighing, similarities to. He's won there before. And I just think Dustin Johnson is rolling, and it's going to make ownership. At these guys at the top, yes, there's differences, but I'll take a discount there. Ricky's the other one for me. It's for a totally different reason. You talk about sand saves, you talk about being able to lag the putts, make those 10-footers. him and Day are the guys, that come to mind when I think of guys that just can consistently hold rounds together with their putter. Ricky this year, obviously it hasn't been the same, but I still trust him long-term on the greens. So those are the two for me. Spieth, as always, wild card. It would be fitting for him to get the career Grand Slam in a year like this and salvage the whole year. But I don't know exactly what to make of him yet.
Yeah, when you look at this pricing, Mike, and you see the 4 guys above 10,000, do you think you'll be massively overweight on any 1 or 2, or does the value rest in a balanced lineup built of $9,000 and $8,000 guys?
Yeah, the issue I have is, Dustin Johnson, clearly the best player in the field. We do have him as an outlier in terms of his finish probabilities relative to the rest of the field. But then you look at the rest of the pricing with, Rory, Spieth, and Fowler. We don't have their finish odds much higher, and in some cases even lower than a lot of the guys in this 9K range. So I can't see myself being heavily overweight any of these players, because Dustin's going to be really chalky. Because to a certain extent he should be, and also because he's coming off the win at the RBC Canadian Open. And then the rest of the guys, I just think, they're not as good of values as the 9K guys. There's not enough there to let them separate. So maybe if someone's going to come in super low owned, I'll take an overweight position. But in general, I'm going to have pretty balanced builds. If Dustin Johnson wasn't going to be chalky, maybe I'd go more studs and duds and take advantage of his, he's clearly the number 1 player in the world, but that's not going to happen. So I'm going to be building really balanced lineups. So I'll have nibbles on these guys just because you want a certain amount of win equity if you're mass multi-entering something like the Millie Maker. But, boring answer is that I'm not going to be heavy on any of these guys up top.
If you had to leave one of them right off your card, who would it be? Because for me, it's probably going to be Spieth, because I can't figure out. At any tournament that's not the Masters, I don't know what Spieth is up to. Do you think that people will be back in on Spieth after watching him at the Open Championship?
I don't know. I was surprised he was only like 7% owned in the Open Championship, and our final ownership projections actually had him around there. So I ended up pivoting a little bit. Originally, I think on the show I said I wasn't going to use him, but I ended up using him because he was projected so low and felt pretty good about it. And then of course it went south on Sunday for him. But I think he's going to be sub 10% owned again. But I don't like the studs and duds builds as much as I did the Open. So I'm less likely to take that game theory play, even if it's similar ownership as it was there. And I just think the course is a little bit different as well.
Of the top 4, Ben, who you fading?
Dustin Johnson, easy for me. Spieth's a guy, that's a given if the ownership's where Mike says is, and I agree. I think he hovers maybe around 10%. It's easier for me to sprinkle, say, get 0.15% and have a nice little position there. If DJ plays well, I expect him to be one of the highest owned guys. 100% I come in underweight.
Yeah, so what would that take for Dustin to push like 30%? Let's say Dustin doesn't win, he comes 3rd at the WGC Bridgestone. Would that push him near 30%, do you think?
I think so. I think he rebounded, he destroyed that easy field, destroyed that easy course. He's going against now a strong field at a strong course. If he does it again, I think people are just going to plug and play him, recency bias. And he is the best player in the world. Even I have to say that at this point. I just think that in a tournament like this, you have so many other options, whether it's pivoting to one of the guys, like Rory or Ricky for me, or going balanced where you can just, it's a common theme in these majors. You can hit 3 or 4 guys in the 9K who are world-class players. That's definitely a viable strategy.
All right, let's talk about these 9K guys. Tiger is the top one at $9,900. We haven't seen the ownership for the Bridgestone yet. I'm guessing he's going to come in with high ownership because Firestone is his course last time to play it too. JT 97, Brooks 96, Rose 94, Fleetwood 93, Molinari, your boy Mike, $9,200. Congratulations on his Open win, by the way. John Rahm 91, Jason Day $9,000. It seems to be a common theme with all of these majors, but for me, just looking at it right off the hop, it seems like JT, Justin Thomas, that is, Justin Rose, and Tommy Fleetwood are probably the 3 plays, and I think Molinari will get lumped into that as well because he's coming off a major win, 3 wins his past 6 starts. He's riding the hot hand, 2nd at the PGA Championship last year. So, Mike, now that Molinari is going to be uber popular and he's up in price, do you still use him?
I don't know, Pat, would you still say that he sucks?
Apparently not. Apparently I was dead wrong on that one.
I do have to say, in a weird way, the last 2 months has been one of the most frustrating things for me in DFS because I have not put together any of the right combinations with Molinari. I have not made any money off of Molinari smashing, which is like, if you told me he had the run that he had, one, I would have said you're nuts, is even though I love Molinari more than anyone, I still would have said you're nuts. And two, I would say I'm rich and living on a beach somewhere, but that's not the case. I'm still here grinding out the show, hoping to take down the Millie this week. But up to 9,200 this week, I gotta imagine. I don't know. He's been on such a great tear. I think people still take him. I think Rose is going to be the most popular, but he's like the deserved most popular. If you're playing cash games, I think you're starting your roster with Justin Rose. Like, that is the absolute best play. And I think at his price range, if DJ's as chalky as Ben thinks he is, hopefully that will keep everybody down a couple points lower than they should be. Like, no individual by a huge amount, but it's just harder to build those balanced lineups with DJ. And I'll still play Rose even if he's chalky in the Millie Maker.
Well, when we think about tee to green, which is going to test your off the tee approach in around the green game, because the courses that I mentioned right off the hop, the other Reese designs or redesigns, there's a lot of players on there who aren't great putters. Tee to green really seems to go a long way at all of his designs. And when you look at the top tee to green players in the field, obviously they're going to be expensive. That's always good to hear. But like, a lot of them are in that $9,000 area. Like DJ's one, Molinari, Woods, Ryan Moore is shockingly number 4. Over the past 24 rounds. Rose, Justin Thomas, Stenson, Rory, Neiman is in there as well. So Ben, where are you looking first look in this $9,000 area? Is it Tiger?
No, it's not Tiger. I can never make Tiger's so polarizing just because he garners more ownership than he should because he's Tiger. Interested to see what he does this week. But Justin Rose is where I'm looking. He's the kind of chalk that I'm certainly going to be buying on. He's going to be popular. He should be popular. I kind of call it a mispricing. I'm pretty stunned he's not in the $10,000 range. Just playing great. I mean, he should have got cut, and then he almost won in the same tournament, which is kind of bizarre. But he's just having a great run here, and I think this course sets up pretty well for him. The other guy I mentioned before, Jason Day. I'm hoping that putting maybe is a little more important than kind of you were just talking about. But he's the guy around the green. If I had one guy to really go to in that kind of situation, it's him. Price, I mean, they price him like he's playing horrible. He's not playing that bad. I mean, he's flat $9K. I think that, that's a bargain for a guy of that quality.
I agree with you on the overall skill set of Day. The problem is, like, can he keep it in the fairway enough not to make it that he's scrambling on every single hole? Because we saw this at the US Open, that it's not that he didn't make every 10-footer, because no one is going to make every 10-footer, but he has put himself in such horrible positions over and over and over that there was just no way he was going to make the cut. Like, if this course is going to play difficult and he's spraying it, like, he's finished. Yeah,
no, I mean, that of these elite guys, these top players in the world, Day is certainly towards the bottom. He hasn't been that good, especially with the irons. It's scary, especially with the spraying at a tree line course like this. I do worry about that. I talk about this all the time in these shows. He's the kind of guy, certain lineups with certain players, because I don't think we know how this plays. If it's where there's a huge emphasis off the tee, the Day lineups that I have may be in a bit of trouble. But if it becomes, man, this is, scrambling, putting, lag putting, that's the guy I want. And I just think at that price, if he gets, a somewhat decent performance off the tee, if it doesn't kill him, I think you're in for a pretty good result, and I'm willing to buy in that kind of spot.
Mike, where are you looking mainly in the $9,000 range? Is Rose underpriced enough that you'll eat the chalk on him as well?
Yeah, I will. And I do think that's a really good example, though, of why you can take some chances in a Millie Maker, because he needed to make a birdie on a difficult 18th hole just to make the cut. And then he gets the good side of the weather draw, smashes it. I think had the best round of the entire tournament in the third round, and ends up finishing T2 with the way things finished out. Then someone like Hideki Matsuyama goes into the 18th hole. We had him with a 99% probability to make the cut, triple bogeys, misses by one. And, it's people forget, like, these little things happen and they kind of having like an exponentially wide difference in the outcome. So just think about that when you're afraid to be a little bit contrarian. I know it's ironic me giving that example while also saying I'm playing chalk Justin Rose, but I'm with Ben on Jason Day. In our adjusted strokes gain metrics in this field over each time frame, we have 2-year, 1 year, 6 month, 2 month. Jason Day is top 12 relative to this field in each of those. And ultimately, we're not entirely sure how it's going to play. Like, give me the guy that we just think is really good, that's consistently putting up good scores relative to the field, regardless of how he's doing it. So I think Day will be one of my highest owned guys here, because I think the combination of skill, price tag, and ownership is going to be best on him of anybody else in the 9K range.
Well, looking back at the past 24 rounds as it pertains to Jason Day, he's first in putting, he's first in sand saves gained, so we know that the short game is going to be there with him. He's also 11th in par 5 scoring against the field, 24th in 450 to 500. Now, a lot of that is putting. As it comes down to it, you got to make those putts to make them birdies, but 37th off the tee in that time, 89th in approach. That's not great, and 104th in the field in fairways gained. Like, I don't know. I'm curious to see what the ownership is going to end up coming in, because it doesn't seem like Jason Day really ever carries a whole lot of ownership, especially up at this price when there's players in better form, playing more consistently. But I don't know if I would want to go to Day when I could just pay up a little bit more for, like, let's say Brooks, who's coming off a disastrous Canadian Open. We'll see what he does at Bridgestone, but it doesn't feel to me like Brooks is going to get a whole lot of hype.
The other thing with Day too, to people in better form, but people now are really looking at like tee to green stats and stuff recently. And as you noted, he doesn't rate well in those. So he's not going to pop for people on a lot of models the way people are doing research nowadays. So whereas, a year or two ago, it might've been different, but that's just kind of the trend that we're seeing in the way people are researching. But I am interested in this upper 9K range to see, is Justin Thomas going to be chalk? Like, I know you think he's going to be chalk. I'm curious, because if he is, and then it keeps Brooks down, I'll play Brooks. I'll play Rahm at 9,100. I think Rose is the chalk guy I want. Day's the guy I know I want. And the rest of the 9K range really just comes down to ownership for me. I imagine I'll have a decent bit of Rahm, just because I always get suckered into Rahm, and he keeps not performing for me, which means he's not performing for others. So each time the ownership's going down a little bit more, and it's a little bit more enticing for me.
Yeah, what do you make of Rahm, Ben? I know we're always it seems like we're always on team Rahm, and then we get like Twitter clips sent to us of him throwing his clubs and just freaking out on the course. So that's never a whole lot of fun, but like at a course like this, do you think that Rahm's skill set can come through, or do you just say, screw it, I like Jon Rahm. Jon Rahm's great. He is 33rd in tee to green over the past 24 rounds. But you can just look at someone like Tommy Fleetwood, who's right there, who just seems exponentially more safe at this point.
Yeah, I think he's safer, but I don't know. I'm willing to hold on probably too long in certain guys, and Rahm is one of those guys for me. Decky's probably the other. I just keep holding on, and like Mike talked about, this is a Decky example. Things happen. It's a fine line. If Decky would have made that cut, who knows where it goes. Rahm imploded, obviously. That does worry me. I thought he was taking a step in the not being crazy department. It's just a really tough guy to break down, because he's so polarizing the way he plays. He's hyper aggressive with the driver. It's tough to know if there's really a course fit. Obviously, you want driver heavy, but I think that he's just the kind of guy, if you're going to buy, you need to know what you're in for. I think he can do it anywhere. He just needs to hold it together. I do worry about the mental side of it, but I'm in line with Mike 100%. I like Rose. I know I want Day. I'm going to be overweight on those guys. The rest of the guys, I think you can make a fair case for. It's going to be mixing and matching. If there's a couple guys that look like they're sub 10%, maybe I try to double the field. There's a couple guys that are approaching 20%. Maybe I take, a slightly underweight approach and just kind of roll the dice, because I don't see much separation in this range.
8K range, Patrick Reed. Did you have anything to comment there, Mike?
Well, I was just going to say, if you're looking at it the way I am, where the balance builds look better and there's not a lot of separation between the 9K and 10K plus, if you wanted to be pretty risky, you could fade all the 10K plus guys, and then you can sprinkle all the 9K guys and not have to, worry too much about the ownership percentages, get a taste of all of them. But that's more of a, like, you're playing 100 lineups type strategy.
Well, it's weird. Like, when I had all the success at the Heritage, I didn't play a single guy above $10,000, and I've seen a lot of different builds win that way so far this year, that it's not going to work out every time, because obviously you needed, let's say at the Canadian Open, Dustin Johnson in order to win. But if the top guy doesn't end up coming through, and Dustin Johnson has proven he's like the only guy who can be the highest priced player on DraftKings that can actually win tournaments that week, which is kind of crazy. But like, is that just not a bad strategy to take most weeks?
Well, I mean, I think it depends. you got to look at all like the win probabilities and stuff. Right now, our projected win equity for those top 4 guys is around 16 to 17%. So 16 to 17% of the time, if you're doing this strategy in the Million Maker, you're dead right off the bat. But the rest of the time, you're pretty live. These guys are expensive enough that anything but a number 1 finish overall, and you're probably, there's probably a combination exists that can beat them, barring, a cheap guy winning and then like DJ coming in second, something like that. So I think it depends on the week. Like last week, for example, at the Canadian Open, I was over on Fleetwood, I was over on Brooks, I was over on DJ, just because I thought that they were so much better plays than the rest of the field. And I also thought that the mid sevens guys that you could make it work with them, weren't that worse off of plays in the 8K range. So it really does depend week to week. I wouldn't say it's something you can do each week, but I am considering it this week.
Well, what do you make of that strategy, Ben, of just I don't want to say you need to go out of your way to fade the top 4, top 5 guys in terms of pricing, but anyone over $10,000, if you were to make your build this week and just start in the $9,000 area, like that, it seems like a pretty decent strategy.
Yeah, it is. I think, Mike just touched upon this. When you have a major field, the depth is there. It's not like giant dead zones in terms of talent. Like look at the RBC. I'll use it again as the example here. You have DJ, and then there's a gap, and then Brooks and Fleetwood, and then a big gap. Now you have 20, all the best players are here. So there's, tiny gaps. It's not giant dead zones. And I think that lends itself to saying, okay, I have other options. If you fade those first 4, you have 10, 15 ridiculously good golfers. Whereas if you do that at a weaker field, you're sacrificing a lot more win equity. And there's just, at those fields, those guys can run away with it easier. Obviously, you don't have to tell me that one of the first 4 can get hot and just dominate any field, but at least here you have some outs, and you have world-class players who in other fields would be that guy around 12K.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did just see Rose withdrew from the Bridgestone with back spasms.
Are you serious? And I have to go change my one and done pick right after we finish. I'll make a little note of that. Change one and done pick. Perfect.
That should keep the ownership down. If we get no word, I like him even more. I mean, I would, unless we get it serious, but if we get no word, that could temper his ownership.
Well, it's funny, like whenever Justin Rose plays well, Henrik Stenson seems to play well at the exact same time, and he's dealing with like lingering injury issues, although it didn't really seem to make that big of a difference at the Open Championship. We'll see how he plays at the Bridgestone, but he falls in this $8,000 range. Patrick Reed is at the very top of it at $8,900, and then he's followed by Matsuyama, Stenson at $8,700, Noren, Sergio, Cantlay, Phil, Xander. Xander and Finau finally got a bump up in price, $8,200 and $8,100. Casey at $8,000, Bubba at $8,000. I mean, is Paul Casey going to continue to just be the highest owned guy at every Millionaire Maker because he's constantly underpriced?
The pricing's absurd at $8,000. Like you're playing cash games. It's Rose, assuming health is all fine, and it's Casey. Like that's where you're starting your builds. And I think he's going to be mega chalk again. I don't really have much more to say. He's just clearly underpriced for his talent level. There's not really much to add to that.
In the first run model that I spit out over the past 50 rounds, Paul Casey came in ranked number 1 in it. And again, that was me de-emphasizing a lot of the putting and really focusing on tee to green over longer stretches of time. Ben, like Rose, if Rose isn't hurt, is Paul Casey just one of these guys that you know is going to be chalk, but the price is too right to pass on?
Yeah, I mean, in cash, it's a given. In top-heavy tournaments, I still think you can make a case for swerving. It's not a guy where I like him, so it's not like, oh, I'm fading him, I want 0%. But if he's coming up 25%, I might try to take a smaller stance, say I have 15. So I have some outs if he crushes. But Paul Casey, as good as he is, and I think he's underpriced, he's not the kind of guy who can or usually ends your week. He's reliable, he's solid. It's nice that he's not super reliant on placement points now that he's priced down. But he's a guy I think as a fade you can make a case for, just because there are guys around him who are much more volatile. But the upside to me is honestly greater than him. So you give me the reduced ownership on a guy like, Leishman or Bryson. I would take a serious look at that in a top-heavy tournament like the Millie.
Well, in that $8,000 range, Ben, who were some of the other options that you do like? Are you going back to Hideki?
Oh, God, I know. 2 straight, just miserable. I certainly going to be overweight. Again, I think, you can maybe it's a bias. You can call it a bias. I see things like him missing in ridiculous fashion at the Open. I just think, man, that's going to scare a lot of people away. The ownership's not going to be there, assuming he doesn't win Bridgestone again. And I do think it's still there for Hideki. We haven't seen it. He's been burning me. Maybe I'm holding on too long, but as a tournament play, the upside is there. I think, is he not even in my radar for something like cash? But if I can take 20, 25% and get, 2x on the field, it's definitely a buy spot for me.
Mike, what do we do with the younger range? I mean, your main man, Tony Finau's there. Xander coming off a very visual, good performance at the Open Championship, ends up coming T2 at a very discounted price in the winning Millionaire Maker lineup. And then you have Patrick Cantlay, who's just $8,400.
Yeah, Finau and Cantlay are really interesting to me as guys that we've generally been on all year long. And now we're going to find out, does the market actually like them as much as us? Because they were, so underpriced for a while that they were still carrying ownership just because kind of no matter how you felt about them, no matter what projection system you were using, they came out as good plays, decent values. This week for the PGA Championship, it's going to be different. There are definitely going to be sites out there that say, okay, this price tag's too high relative to the opportunity cost. And if that drags down the ownership, I'm still buying. With Finau in particular, I'm worried that I'm just having wishful thinking that this price bump will keep his ownership down and people will still end up playing him, someone who always seems to be popular. But I'm really hoping we get him, more in like the low teens. He's not going to be low owned, but I'd be disappointed if we saw him like over 13% or so. I'm really hoping he comes in under that. And if he does, he's the type of guy I'll play in 20 to 25% of my lineups. So someone that spreads the risk a lot. That's a higher exposure take for me, maybe even more. Because he's my boy.
Ben, Sergio is right there. Bubba is in this range.
Dear God, Sergio is. I don't know, man. He might be serious problems. I thought RBC. I was overweight on him there. I like that spot. Not good.
No,
that was a stunning missed cut.
It really was. I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
so good. I was with you guys. I wasn't going to play him. And then when I ran, like I said, I like to run some like leverage scenarios based on the T20 odds versus our ownership projections. And it was like, you have to play Sergio given these odds. And he's just been so atrocious for like 6 months to a year now.
Yeah, it's tough. You look at him and the reasons to buy are still there in the sense of, the ownership. Nobody obviously is seeing that and hopping on. But I think there's just too many names. Give me Cantlay, give me even Noren, who, not a guy I think is going to be overly popular in a situation like this. It's just hard to trust Sergio right now.
What do we do with Bubba if we're going to emphasize off the tee? And Mike, you said you favor distance over accuracy. How about the guy in the field who's ranked number 2 in off the tee over the past 24 rounds?
Yeah, Bubba has just been a case that's been difficult for me all year long because there's still some like that bad data from last year mixed in. And it seems like, too, this year he's crushed when he's been chalk for the most part. And then when he hasn't been chalk, he hasn't done well. It's been he's just followed the ownership line, his performances right on cue. So I'm honestly really torn on that one. I think for both him and Sergio, I want to see really low ownership if I'm going to use both of them because they both stand out in our initial finish probability projections as not really belonging in this pricing tier with the other guys. And if that's the case, if I'm buying that, then certainly I want to see like sub 5% ownership on them. It is interesting. Look at the Bet365 outright win odds. They have Bubba right there with Finau, with Casey at 50-1 right now. So, the betting markets think he belongs there, but right now what we're seeing, he doesn't belong there. I did want to note, Ben was talking about if he's hanging on to Hideki too long, stuff like that. I do think that scoring distributions can be random to an extent, and people would have said I was hanging on to Molinari for too long, for 6 months, and all of a sudden it pays off in bunches. So I think if you truly believe the talent's there, it's a sport where there's so much variance. You really do just have to put the past behind you. And if you think it's a good play at the right ownership, like just keep plugging away. It's going to happen sooner or later.
Is there anything Phil could do this week, Ben, to get you on to Phil? Because it's weird. The trend has been everyone wants to play Tiger at a higher price at these majors. And so far so good. But like Phil just gets no ownership anymore.
What could Phil do this week? I'm trying to think. Not cheat would be step one. No, honestly, there's nothing that even if he won, I still wouldn't play him. I just don't see it anymore. He still obviously has the gigantic blow up potential. The nuclear upside, it seems less and less. You know, in a scenario like Bridgestone, there's 4 rounds. Maybe I sprinkle, but at a course like this, if his spraying, you know, the way he's a weird case because I've said this before with him. He's an elite bunker player, I think to a detriment sometimes, because sometimes he just doesn't know when to just say, you know what, this is a terrible shot. Let me take my medicine. Let me leave 20 feet for par. He tries things because he's Phil and he pulls it off 1 out of 5, but the other 4 times it's a double, it's a triple. And I just think that mentality at these courses in majors is really detrimental to him. So he is off my list.
Yeah, if anyone in the top 30 in pricing over the past 24 rounds, Phil is 94th off the tee, 59th in approach, and he is an impressive 84th tee to green and 70th in fairways gained. It doesn't seem like a great spot for him, but I don't know. Who do you think, Mike? Phil or Tiger? Who do you think ends up with because we know that Tiger, if you have to put driver in his hand, he's not doing anything either.
So what's the question?
Who do you think? Who do you think has the better score?
Tiger has the better score.
Tiger has the better. Do you think Tiger should be priced that much higher than Phil?
I do.
Okay.
We've got Phil in adjusted strokes gained over the last 2 months, 77th in this field. Like that's some really atrocious golf. And he had this stretch where I actually felt like we were above the market on him. I think it was the Waste Management Open. He did really well and won a GPP using him that week. But as Ben said, like at this point, it doesn't seem like the upside that, you know, we call him like a DK scorer, and it's true, but it just doesn't seem like it's worth the risk given the combination of 1, the recent form, and 2, the type of courses that you're playing at these major events. So, you know, if he's going to be mega low owned, you know, I'll sprinkle 5 to 7%, but like most likely he's someone that I'm not going to be using.
I think one of the biggest questions people are going to have this week when constructing their lineups, and maybe it's a cash game scenario, but I think it'll trickle over into the Millie Maker too. In the $7,000 range, at the very top, on one hand, you got Bryson, who snubs handshakes and melted down over in Germany, and then Matt Kuchar, who is $7,900 as well, came in at a shockingly low ownership at the Open Championship. I don't think I've ever remember seeing Kuchar that low in a Millie Maker, but I kind of like Kuchar at $7,900. I think he's a good play.
Yeah, Kuchar, it's a situation. I had him on the fast track to being Phil. I thought he might be done to an extent, and now he's clawed back from the depths a little. I'm interested too. You know, he's always got a cashy feel to it. He's somewhat reliable. That's been shaky this year. I think it's been an atypical year for him. But, yeah, he gave me some hope. Leishman's the guy, though. I mean, it's right in that same range that I do gravitate towards. I think maybe I overrate him. He's just a guy, Mike just talked about that. I consistently play him. You know, he's shown flashes in majors. He's a good player, and I think he's constantly undervalued, underpriced, and the ownership doesn't gravitate towards him in majors. You know, we see him chalk, but it's usually in, you know, decent field events on the tour. So that's a spot that I'll kind of go to. And then Bryson's just a wild card for me. I see it off the tee. His antics in Europe were something. I don't know what to really make of him, honestly, at this point. I think good worthwhile tourney play, but hard to feel good about it, honestly.
Yeah, well, even Mike, like a lot of people are going to look at what happened over in Germany and people missed it. He basically refused to shake the hand of the guy who won that he was playing with because he melted down coming down the stretch. But if you told me, like, when we go back and look at it, you can look at it one of 2 ways. One, he melted down. That's awful. That's horrible for Bryson. I don't want anything to do with him. Or you just look and say, hey, Bryson had another top 10 finish, and he was supposed to be injured like 3 weeks ago. Played pretty well at the Open too. Like the form is still there for Bryson. I might use both these guys. And you know, Ben mentioned Leishman. I like Grace to a certain extent, but I think that Kuchar and Bryson are the 2 plays here. Do you have any preference either way, Mike?
I think in cash, like you'd play Kuchar just because he's steady, but Millie Maker, I want the upside of Bryson. I think that's the guy I'd rather use here. And in general, I'm going to be all over this range, and that just comes back to my balanced build with, you know, not having as much 10K plus guys. I feel like I'm not sacrificing, with the exception of DJ, too much in terms of finish probabilities up there, and where I'm picking it up is here in this, mid-high 7Ks range. We've got a bunch of guys with around a 22 to 24% chance at a top 20 finish. You look at the low 7,000s, we've only got a couple guys even above 20%, a whole ton of guys more in that 15 to 20% range. So I think clearing up the cap space to be able to be overweight a handful of these guys up here, Louis, Grace, Adam Scott, I think I'll be overweight on a bunch of these guys up here, and then just just try and avoid getting too many lineups where I have to have a lot of these low 7K or sub 7K guys in my lineup.
All right, so Ryan Moore is someone I just mentioned rates out really well in terms of tee to green, has played well on Reese designs in the past, actually plays these longer courses pretty well because he's very good with long irons. Ben, do you have any interest in Ryan Moore?
Ryan Moore at the JDC was awful, and then he was very good the next week. It was incredibly tilting. I think it's a pretty good setup for him. You mentioned the long irons. He's played in a bunch of PGAs, had some decent results, 13th last year. I think that's fine. For me, in this range, there are a couple other guys I have ahead of him. Ben Rasa is playing good, another good long iron player. Peters is a wild man.
Nope. Pass on Peters.
Oh, what? He showed a little hope. No Peters for you?
Listen, maybe you can correlate him in your hothead lineup with John Rahm and be on your way. Maybe that's the skill set that you want to go with there. But I don't understand why I would take Peters. There are significantly better players around him.
Yeah, I still hold on to that Peters nuclear Thorborn Olesen upside, just wild man. But yeah, Ryan Moore's the guy. I think the price is fair. The course is pretty good for him. He's been disappointing this year. The putting has been really disappointing, and that's something, I don't weigh putting so variant. It's hard to weigh it, but I do want my guys showing at least a little form, and he has scared me there. That's usually a staple of his game. So there's some guys I don't even want to bring up. Sneds is the other one for me, who's just been, I cannot get him right. I loved him at the Open. He was terrible there. He was good last week. It's really polarizing. I think the form fits a little, again, another good scrambler, crafty guy. Price seems fine, but it's tough. These guys do have red flags in this range.
Yeah, well, Snedeker's one that has won at Eastlake before. He's won at Torrey Pines. So, Eastlake is a bit shorter. Torrey Pines obviously a lot longer, but he got a assist from the wind on that one where he ended up getting the good wave finished on a Sunday. It didn't wrap up until Monday, and all of a sudden Brandt Snedeker is the winner. I like him more at wedge courses. I'm going to be highly interested in Brandt Snedeker at the Wyndham the following week if he ends up playing there, which I assume he will, to try to get some more FedEx Cup points before the playoffs start. But I just look at it I'm just scrolling down through the names, and the one I keep coming to, and it kind of terrifies me because it's his first career major as a pro, Mike, it's Joaquin Niemann. He's just sitting right there.
Yeah, I think Niemann's a good play. We've seen the DK scoring upside out of him. We've seen pretty variant results out of him. I think he's a fine play. I'm off Snedeker. We just have him over the past year as just being well below average, even not even, but especially in this field, we have him 70th plus by each time frame. But I do like the Ryan Moore play. He is one of those guys in the low 7,000s that we do have with somewhat close T20 odds, the high 7K guys. And it's because we have him pretty consistent over 2 year, 1 year, 6 months, 2 months. We have him top 30 in this field in adjusted strokes gained. So Niemann, but bringing it back to Niemann, the only concern I have with him is it seems like people really like to play him. They're used to seeing him at a higher price tag just because he's been in these softer fields. And I wonder if that, even though obviously the opportunity cost is way higher, they just really jump at the bit when they see him at a sub 8K price tag.
Any worries or any lean towards Kevin Kisner here? He performed pretty admirably at the Open Championship, was near the very top of the leaderboard at the PGA Championship last year. The Canadian Open didn't go so hot for him, but again, tough course, good putter, very good scrambler, good around the greens, going to keep the ball in the fairway. If all that's coming back for him, why wouldn't I use Kisner here, Ben?
I thought that after the Open, maybe Kiz could get on a run. I was pretty disappointed. I know it's just one tournament after that, but RBC wasn't great, missed the cut. And at the Open, he was that's as good as you're going to see anybody putt. I I don't know how much I can really read into that. I'm a Kisner guy. I like him. I still am kind of a little hesitant. He's just had a bad year. And I think that sadly the Open was more of the outlier than kind of some of the other results that we've seen. So I'll go to CH3 again, another guy I cannot seem to get right. I never played him. Then this year I'm playing him. He's, just a guy. He's more for his consistency. He's usually a cash play in softer fields. 7,200, him and Chappell are there. Certainly different types of players. One's super polarizing in Chappell with the upside. But I think CH3 is kind of fit for a course like this. He tee to green, he should be good. Hopefully he doesn't have to rely too much on scrambling. And just could be in line for good performance at that price where I'm not hoping he makes the team, but I just want him to kind of do his job.
All right, so the guy – oh, go ahead.
I was supposed to say the other thing on Kisner in the Open, obviously he played well, but as Ben said, he putted well. And I know Nelson Adcock, who's in our subscriber chat at Daily Roto, he on Twitter pushed out the guy's strokes gained adjusting for where they were in the weather wave. And Kisner got a really, really big bump. It might have been the biggest bump of all the guys that finished top 20 just based on where his tee times happened to fall.
This might have to go into what happens at Bridgestone, but here's some guys that I like. One of them is Ian Poulter. I like that he's down in price. He burned a lot of people at the Open Championship with that horrible Friday, but he rebounded nicely at the Canadian Open, and I like Poulter if this course plays hard. And if the winning score is going to be like -7, -6. And we've seen PGA Championships get a little bit more difficult over the past few years, but like he played really well at the Canadian Open. He just couldn't putt, which is really atypical for Ian Poulter. But he's going to hit all the fairways. He plays these long par fours really well, and he can scramble. If he can get that hot putter, I don't need him to win. He's only $7,400. That's a nice spot for Ian Poulter, I think.
Yeah, I think Poulter is fine. A couple of the guys I'm interested in, Emiliano Grillo, after burning everyone when he was chalked because he had an egregious price tag at the Open and then didn't even come close to making the cut. And then I think the U.S. Open, it looked like he had this round in the second that was going to put him through the cut line and end up moving to +8 instead of +9, and he missed it there. I'm hoping him being back into the 7Ks and those disappointing performances at the majors keeps his ownership down. So I like him a lot. And then Terrell Hatton, I'm interested in. He's just had some really atrocious recent performances, some of them in fields that weren't even that great, and he wasn't even making cuts. So I don't entirely know what to do with him, but I feel like he's not going to be owned, and I just am fine using a dice roll on him.
Per the opening odds for the PGA Championship compared to the pricing, Hatton has the best odds to win of anyone in this range not by a lot, but like he's 80-1, and the guys around him are 125, 150, 100, 125, that whole range. So by Vegas, he would be the best play if you just simply looked at that. Does that make any sense to you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, but there are guys, and he fits that where, they have a better chance to win and a better chance to get cut. And I think that's kind of what he is. There's some more stable guys. Grillo is a guy. Yeah, he's burned me like everyone else, but I'll go right back there. Hatton, definitely a worthwhile upside play. I just think the blow-up risk is substantial as well.
It is. He has made 4 cuts in a row. He was T51 at the Open Championship. Put in just a gentleman's effort to make the cut, which I was very appreciative of because I was on him. But before that, a 6 at the U.S. Open, T16 in France, T9 at the Scottish Open. I think Hatton's actually quite a good play. And now that we're not at the British Open, people are going to be really veering away from the Euros, and now might be the time to lean in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to mention that earlier, is that this lends itself, I think, we're going to see a lot more names that people are familiar with that have a more body of work. So I do think that the Euros will naturally get an ownership discount.
So Hatton, Grillo, and Hoffman, I think, is another name you can add to that in the lower $7,000 area. They're all $7,200. I'll dig in more next week, and on Tuesday's show, we'll make some definitive picks on that. But right after, it's $7,100. It's like the Pat Mayo range. We got Luke List, Kyle Stanley, Russell Knox. I'm in on all 3 of those guys.
I mean, I'm lukewarm on those guys. I feel like List is nothing more than a sprinkle at most. I know you're going to love him down in this range.
Nothing more than a sprinkle?
My Luke List love, he was way up there in the tee to green statistics for quite a while. I kept riding him like post hot streak after I missed out on the early season successes he has had. And I think, we talk about holding on to guys too long. I think I'm going to cut cut date with Luke List this week.
Hey, Luke List, T3 in Scotland, T39 at the Open Championship. The form is just coming back together, Mike.
I mean, maybe that's the case, but I just don't see anything with him right now that's standing out above the other guys in this range, especially like, Haddon, who we just talked about, and Grillo, I just think are much better players. And the other thing too, as I noted, I don't plan on spending a whole lot of exposure in this range in general if I can, avoid it. Whereas the Open Championship, it was like sprinkle here, sprinkle there, low sevens, high sixes. I was all over a bunch of guys in that range. Oh God, are you gonna hit me with like a phrasing when you post produce?
No. Why would I do that to you?
I don't know. It seems like something you would do, where like outclip this for the show, or maybe it just sounded worse in my head, but I felt like I didn't articulate very well just there.
Ben, you're in on Luke List, right? Yes. Just say yes.
Yeah. No, not really. The one thing I say, I don't think I was ever in on Luke List. I didn't hold on too long because I was never there. I was getting burned when he was playing good. I will say, power credit to you and Luke List. I didn't expect him to play well at the Open, and he is playing better, and it's been sustained. The around the green numbers, I think, not that he's an elite player, but he's made real strides that I think will stick. But at every tournament, there's kind of eventually a cliff somewhere in the pricing where you're just like, all right, this is kind of a line I don't want to get too many guys under. And for me, it's that 7,200 where it ends with Hoffman and Grillo. I don't love this range really when we start getting down here. I may have a couple guys, Fitzpatrick, because what I do.
Okay, if I'm going to play a Luke List, you're going to play Matthew Fitzpatrick?
Yeah.
Now,
I'll get you.
This is probably going to cause him to win 3 of his next 6 events, but Matthew Fitzpatrick is trash.
Is this a bet?
Yeah, I was about to say, if you want your Keegan money back.
List versus Fitzpatrick? Deal.
Sure. Put it on the board. I'll be Venmoing you Friday probably because Fitzy might not get it done. But yeah, I mean, good with the long irons, plays good in big tournaments. I'll take a stab there. Again, I don't love this range as a whole. I think that Mike talked about that 7,200. There's a lot of options there. And that's where I'm going to really try to end a lot of my teams, depending on how I build.
I got 3 more names in this range, Mike, and you can weigh in on Matthew Fitzpatrick as well if you'd like, because he's trash, so you probably don't want to play him. But the other guys are Duffner, Woodland, and Danny Willett. There's a name for you. Danny Willett coming back with a vengeance, playing exceptionally well recently. Do you have any interest in those guys, Mike?
Maybe a little bit Duffner. Willett, I have no interest in. That was one of the weirdest cases when he won the Masters, and then whatever happened,
it wasn't a weird case. He was like a top 10. He's basically what Noren was right now, is what Willett was 2.5 years ago.
Right, but so if Noren did what Willett just did the past year and a half or whatever, that would be pretty surprising. Like, he was god awful for a while. And it was nice.
He blew out his shoulder. What do you want the guy to do?
I don't know. Play better. Play some better golf.
I mean, he could have
take some time off or play better. I don't know.
And now he's playing.
Bryson treatment.
But now he's playing better again. Are we just saying like, oh, this guy who is a former like elite player in the world can't be elite again? Like Stenson went through this at a point of his career.
Just for me, and again, this might be where I get into trouble being like too much of a slave to the data. It's just he's just such an egregious play. Based on what he's done, that even if you think some of that data is bad and you remove some of it, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. I'm off. I'd rather take a chance on, like, I don't know, you got JB Holmes here, who I think popped in one of the metrics you mentioned at the top of the show. He's got good distance. If he can make a cut, he's going to put up some birdies. So I'd rather go there.
Ben, T6, T19, T24 in the past 3 starts for Danny Willett?
Yeah, I mean,
cut. There's like 6 cuts right past that, though.
Yeah, a lot of bad data in there. He's an interesting case. I think for data-driven situations, he's a really hard for projections, things like that. I obviously go a little more on feel. So I like guys like that. I think it's a buy low spot. It could be that, you look and maybe he's just not the same player he was, and he's just hit a little micro stretch here. I'm willing to take the risk on a guy like that because I think that say he is the golfer, and when he won the Masters, it wasn't that, it wasn't the Willett that we kind of know now. He was, I think, a reasonable target back then. It wasn't that crazy. So at 7K, if he's returning to that kind of form, he should not be there. And that's a huge bargain in a spot like this where he won't be owned. I don't have to allocate a ton. And I certainly will buy someone like Willett.
All right, finally the
one Danny Willett team for you guys.
One Danny Willett team. Are there like head-to-head bets you want to make down here? Like who's some loser that you like?
Take him versus List.
Well, I like both of them.
But he likes both.
Oh yeah, see what goes on over here.
Will you give me? Will you give me Ben? I mean, I'll go back to Ben on this one. Will you give me Willett versus your main man Bill Haas?
No, I can't defend Bill Haas. He's Bill Haas.
I'll give you Willett versus Pat Perez.
I like Pat Perez though. Yeah, but no, because I kind of want to play some. I don't want to be rooting actively against Pat Perez.
Okay,
put it
I'll take Fitzpatrick.
Okay, deal. I'll take Willett versus Fitzpatrick.
Okay.
So yeah. I'll go List versus Fitzpatrick, Willett versus Fitzpatrick, and get all my Keegan versus Molinari money back.
Was it really Keegan versus Molinari?
Yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how things have changed.
Yeah, a little bit. Although Keegan had a nice little performance in Canada.
Yeah, no, he's been playing really well.
That's what I was hoping he would do at the U.S. Open.
Couple weeks early, that happens.
Looked like he was pulling a Keegan where he was in contention after 2 rounds, was going to completely drop out, had that bad 3rd round, and then just went ham in round 4.
Yeah, you don't want to. Keegan's not great with a whole lot of pressure on him. It's when he gets to go out in the morning, no one really cares what he's up to, and boom, he goes and posts a score. That's the Keegan method. Neiman's kind of the same way now too. You get Neiman out early on a Sunday, guy shooting 63.
Good for showdown slates.
Yeah, absolutely. They're the guys to target. 6K range. Just a few notables from down here. The two that just kind of pop for me if I was targeting off the tee. And I don't love this, but Billy Horschel and Bo Hostler, both at $6,900, I think are acceptable flyers. Si Woo is down here. Obviously, Si Woo's there, but Andrew Landry, $6,600, very good off the tee. And then Brendan Steele is just $6,500. That seems like a steal to me.
Yeah, I don't mind Steele down here. He's a guy, he always comes out hot early in the year. Then he gets, I don't want to say lost. He just tapers off. And now it's a pretty nice target. You have Austin Cook down there. The other, God, this guy, I don't know, another one. Maybe I'm wrong. You guys can tell me. Russell Henley, to me, I always picture him as a golfer who should be closer. I'm not saying with, but closer to the Finau Xander group than where they put him at. He's 6,700. I just think he's a better player than where he's priced. I'd take him over most of those guys. He's a guy that if I do go aggressive stars and scrubs, I'll look to him, Kevin Na's there as well. Someone like that to fill out the last spot for me.
Yeah, Kevin Na, I actually think is a pretty fine play here, especially if scrambling comes into it and the scores stay down. He's just been playing really well. He even played well at the Open, and no one even really noticed.
Yeah, no, I had him there, and I had a long list of problems. He was not one of them, though. He's just in good form, and the scrambling's really, really been great this year.
Mike, pique your interest in like J.J. Spawn, Jordan L. Smith, Austin Cook? Any of those names registering for you?
Not really. I mean, the Steele one's interesting just because I think anytime you get a guy that, at a certain point in the not too distant past was chalk at higher price tags that, there's some just, pullback theory there that has some interest as far as our straight, data finish probabilities. The 2 guys that Ben mentioned are the guys that we like the most under 7,000, and Kevin Na and Russell Henley. I was on vacation for the Open Championship, so I remember looking and I had Henley and I was pumped after that first round. And, I don't know what happened. Goes on, shoots an 80 in round 2. But I still think he's a good play down here. Now I'm struggling with because it seems like I'm battling what I said earlier about like not being overly concerned with course fit. And then also, does he have the distance to, make it worth it but I guess he's so cheap that it's still probably an okay play.
I was going to save this, but I do have one sleeper play that I am going to use from the sub $7,000 area. Do you know who that person is?
Chris Wood.
Chris Wood, Mike?
Sleeper play sub 7,000. Oh geez. I'll say Ryan Armour.
Oh, Ryan ML. No, he really let me down at the Open Championship. Poor Ryan Armour. I think his little bit of a run is over. $6,900. It's Nick Watney. He won here. Well, not won here. He won on a Reese design at Bethpage Black. I know that was set up for the Barclays, but still a very tough course. I just like the way that he's been striking the ball. And like when you go back and look, like I mentioned, some of the winners that you've had at some of these Reese redesigns and designs, that great ball strikers, poor putters. And like, you know, anytime the Keegan can win a major at one of these courses and Duffner can compete too, then you're looking at guys that just are elite ball strikers. I just think that Nick Watney is sort of rounding into form, very underneath the radar, and he doesn't need to do much. All he needs to do is make the cut. Be one of those top 70 in ties, Nick Watney, and I think that he comes in like 1% or lower.
Yeah, you don't have to sell me. I play Nick Watney all the time. The irons have been heating up lately. You know, he's good at RBC. Thing with him, and this is certainly a worthwhile guy, you know, the putting is the great variance there, and that's what you want. You know, if you say, hey, if he gets the hot putter, he can make a splash for me, because I think the irons and the tee to green will be fine in a place like this. I mean, we saw at Wells Fargo what can happen when he gets hot with the putter.
What do you think, Mike? Do you have any interest in Mr. Nick Watney? And mind you that if you go like Google search him and look at him, he is the most surprised man on the planet at all times. He's just looking like this. The
most surprised man on the planet.
Yeah. Nick Watney. That's his new nickname.
Surprised that you want to play him.
No, don't be like that.
No, I just, like I said, if this was the Open Championship, you know, maybe I have interest just because I was building so studs and duds there, but I'm just so balanced that, you know, I might play 5 guys down here, you know, even with 100 or so lineups, I might only play a handful of guys down here and he doesn't crack the top handful. So the Open Championship, I was playing like 10, 15 guys down here and spreading them all out. And that's just not going to be the way I'm building this week.
All right. Any final thoughts on the initial look at the pricing? I know I got you guys to do this within like an hour of the pricing coming out, but I feel like we've talked this through a little bit. I got some guys that I want to dig into a little bit more, and we'll re-up all this stuff next Tuesday. 2 different guests, but you can always find all of Mike and Ben's work. They're going to be updating throughout the week as well. But Mike, final thoughts here on your first look at the PGA Championship.
I'm just extremely interested to see where Colin Drew, who does our ownership projections at Daily Roto, has this 9K tier pegged, because I think that's really going to dictate a lot of what I do. Again, just to reiterate, like Justin Rose, even if he's chalky, I think Jason Day is going to be the best overall tournament play from there. But there's still 5 to 6 guys that I could see being underweight, overweight, just completely dependent on ownership percentages. So I'm just really interested to see where those come out at.
What do you think, Ben? Final thoughts.
I think that depending on what we see at Bridgestone, specifically with DJ, is going to determine a lot, because if he's overly popular, it's going to boost my Rory exposure directly. I know I'm going to have him, but if I can get the straight pivot with avoiding the balanced and the star that people are going to choose, the Rory, Spieth, Fowler micro range is going to be one that I'm certainly going to attack.
Is Fowler just going to be uber chalky again?
He's always chalky. I mean, it's Ricky. People can't get away.
All right, Ben, what's coming up on FanVice for the PGA Championship?
Yeah, we're going to be, rolling out everything. We got Andrew Barron doing his projections, have a player pool, our tiers, certainly articles, the podcasts and whatnot. And then in Slack, and then we're getting ready, all hands on deck for football right around the corner. So obviously fun time to be at FanVice.
Mike, let us know what's going on at dailyroto.com.
Yeah, definitely check us out. We got monthly, weekly, seasonal, remaining season packages for PGA. We've got the finish probabilities. We've got the fantasy projections for DraftKings. We've also got a a free podcast that we'll put out to complement the premium content, which with a pro tip that Colin does. As I mentioned, his ownership projections have been really strong for the majors. I think that will help people make their million maker lineups quite a bit. And just like Ben said with FanVice, we're getting ready for NFL season. Hoping to have projections for week 1 up pretty soon, and a beta version of the new optimizer that we're putting out. So we're really excited about that.
All right. I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter at the PME. Same with Instagram and Facebook, which is the easiest way to find the running list of content. I have a whole bunch of golf, and the full Pat Mayo Experience Fantasy Football Draft Kit is available pinned to the top there too. If you want to get in the draw for some DK bucks, remember, give the episode a like, go in the comment section, give me your single favorite value play along with your DraftKings handle, or on Twitter or Facebook. No quoting, just retweeting and sharing, and then not direct message me, just reply with your DK handle and the hashtag DKPGA champ. And then boom, you're in the draw for some DK bucks. I'll announce the winners on Monday's show when I talk to Feinberg, and we'll get that all worked out. Plus, fantasynational.com. The year is running out, but hey, you still got a major, you still got all the FedEx Cup playoffs. Get yourself in now. Become a member of fantasynational.com today. The biggest stat engine on the interwebs, most customizable, tournament projections, ownership projections, event simulator, lineup generator, every single thing that you'll need. And the PGA Championship DraftKings pricing up there right now. So go check it out. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!